The wheelchair crashed into the mahogany desk, sending crystal decanters tumbling to the Persian rug below. Thaddeus Blackmore's face contorted with rage as he swept his arm across the surface, scattering financial reports worth billions. "Get out." His voice echoed through the cavernous study of his Hamptons estate. "I said get out." The third nurse this month backed toward the door, her starched uniform wrinkled from dodging flying objects. "Mr. Blackmore, please, you need your medication. I need to be left alone to die in peace." Thaddeus spun his wheelchair around, his once powerful frame now confined to the mechanical prison that had become his existence since the accident 6 months ago. "Send whoever hired you my regards." "They're fired too." The door slammed shut, leaving him surrounded by the wreckage of his latest outburst. Outside, October rain pelted the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic. The sound matched the storm raging inside his chest. His phone buzzed. Another call from his business partner demanding decisions about the pharmaceutical empire they'd built together. Thaddeus let it ring. What was the point? He couldn't feel his legs, couldn't walk into his own boardroom, couldn't even shower without help. The doctors promised partial recovery, but their optimism felt like mockery. The intercom crackled. "Sir." His assistant Marcus spoke carefully. "The new nurse has arrived. Send her away." "She's already here, sir." In the foyer, Thaddeus closed his eyes. Another eager healthcare professional ready to change his life with positive thinking and determination. He'd broken 4 of them already. This one wouldn't last a week. "Fine. Send her up. Let's get this over with." Minutes later, the study door opened without a knock. Thaddeus didn't turn around, staring instead at the rain streaking down the glass. "Mr. Blackmore." The voice was calm, professional, with a slight southern lilt that caught his attention. "I'm Serafina Rosewood. I'll be handling your care." He spun his chair around, ready to unleash another verbal assault, but stopped short. The woman standing in his doorway wasn't what he expected. Mid-30s, auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing scrubs instead of the formal uniforms the agency usually sent. Her green eyes assessed the destruction around his desk without judgment or pity. "As you can see, Miss Rosewood, I'm not exactly cooperative." He gestured at the mess. "Save yourself the trouble and leave now." She stepped further into the room, her sneakers crunching on broken crystal. "It's Mrs. Rosewood, actually, and I don't scare easily." She pulled a tablet from her bag. "Your medical file makes interesting reading. Spinal injury from a car accident, T12 vertebrae damaged but not severed. Refused surgery twice, dismissed 6 physical therapists, and according to your doctors, you're wallowing." "Excuse me." "You heard me." Serafina moved closer, her gaze never wavering. "Your injury isn't permanent if you do the work, but you'd rather throw tantrums like a spoiled child than face the possibility of getting better." No one had spoken to him like that since the accident. Board members, friends, even his own family tiptoed around his condition with kid gloves. The directness was jarring. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know you were driving home from your research facility when a truck ran a red light and T-boned your Porsche. I know the impact compressed your spine but didn't sever it. I also know you've been hiding in this house for 6 months feeling sorry for yourself while your company stock drops and your employees wonder if their CEO has given up." Thaddeus gripped the wheelchair arms. "My employees are fine." "Are they?" "Because the news says Blackmore Pharmaceuticals just lost a major contract to develop a new cardiac medication. Your competitors are circling like vultures." The words hit harder than he expected. His life's work, the company he'd built from nothing, was suffering because he couldn't pull himself together. The thought made his chest tight. "What do you want from me?" Serafina set her tablet on the bookshelf and looked around the destroyed study. "I want you to clean up this mess. Then we're going to start your physical therapy. No arguments, no tantrums, no throwing things at me." "And if I refuse?" She shrugged. "Then you'll rot in that chair for the rest of your life, while everything you built crumbles around you. Your choice." Something in her tone sparked anger he hadn't felt in months. Not the destructive rage that made him throw decanters, but something sharper, more focused. "You think you can fix me? I think you can fix yourself if you stop being a coward." The insult hung in the air between them. Thaddeus had been called many things in his 43 years: ruthless, brilliant, demanding, but never a coward. The accusation stung because part of him wondered if it was true. "1 week," he said finally. You get 1 week to prove whatever point you're trying to make. When you fail like all the others, I don't want to see you again. Serafina picked up her tablet and headed for the door. Fair enough. But when I succeed, you're going to thank me. She left him sitting among the broken glass and scattered papers, feeling something he hadn't experienced since the accident. Curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. For the first time in months, Thaddeus Blackmore wasn't thinking about dying. He was thinking about living. Serafina's phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. The caller ID made her stomach clench. Demetrius Kane, her husband of 8 years. She let it go to voicemail while adjusting her rearview mirror in the Blackmore estate driveway. 3 days had passed since her first encounter with Thaddeus. 3 days of small victories. He'd cleaned up the study without being asked, participated in basic exercises, even ate the meals she prepared instead of throwing them against the wall. Progress, but fragile. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. You missed dinner last night. Demetrius's voice carried that familiar edge of controlled irritation. Again. I texted you. The Blackmore case requires extended hours. Your job is part-time consulting, Serafina, not playing house with some crippled millionaire. The casual cruelty in his words made her grip the steering wheel tighter. He's recovering from a serious injury. It takes time. Time you should be spending at home. With your husband. Through the phone, she could hear the clink of expensive china. Demetrius would be sitting at their marble breakfast table in their pristine Upper East Side apartment, reading medical journals, while his housekeeper served coffee in cups that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. I'll be home tonight. See that you are. We have the hospital charity gala this weekend. I need you looking presentable. The line went dead. Serafina stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. When had she become this person? Walking on eggshells around her own husband, measuring her words like they might explode? She climbed the front steps of the Blackmore mansion, using her key card to enter through the service entrance. Marcus had given it to her yesterday with obvious relief. Having a nurse who actually stayed longer than a week seemed to surprise everyone. The house felt different this morning. Quieter, but not the oppressive silence of depression. Something calmer. She found Thaddeus in the sunroom, sitting at a small table with coffee and what looked like business documents. You're early, he said without looking up. You're awake. She set her bag down and assessed him. Clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt instead of the wrinkled t-shirts he'd favored during his hermit phase. And dressed. Don't get excited. I'm still in this chair. But you're engaged with the world again. That's progress. Thaddeus gestured to the papers spread before him. My lawyer brought these yesterday. Apparently, my extended absence has created some legal complications. Board members questioning my competency to run the company. Serafina moved closer, noting the tension in his shoulders. What kind of complications? The kind that could cost me everything I've built. He looked up at her for the first time. My business partner, Edmund Thorne, has been making moves, suggesting I step down permanently, let him take control. Do you trust him? I used to. Thaddeus leaned back in his wheelchair. But 6 months of isolation teaches you things about people. Thorne hasn't visited once. Neither have most of my so-called friends. Fair-weather relationships. Exactly. He closed a folder with more force than necessary. Tell me something, Mrs. Rosewood. Why are you still here? The other nurses lasted days, not weeks. The question caught her off guard. She busied herself checking his medication schedule, buying time to think. Professional pride, I suppose. Try again. She met his gaze. Those dark eyes were too perceptive, seeing more than she wanted to reveal. Maybe I recognize something in you. Someone who's lost their way but isn't ready to admit it. And you're an expert on being lost? The words hung between them, charged with unexpected intimacy. Serafina felt heat creep up her neck. This wasn't professional territory anymore. We should start your exercises. In a minute. Thaddeus wheeled his chair closer. You never talk about your husband. Is that deliberate? The directness of the question made her chest tight. My marriage isn't relevant to your care, isn't it? You spend 12 hours a day here. You answer his calls with that look on your face like you're bracing for impact. Either he's the most understanding man alive, or there's trouble at home. Serafina turned away, pretending to organize his medications. Dr. Kane is a busy surgeon. He understands demanding schedules. Dr. Kane. Thaddeus's voice sharpened. Demetrius Kane? She froze. You know him? Know of him. Manhattan General, right? Cardiac surgery. Something shifted in Thaddeus's expression. We've never met personally, but his reputation precedes him. Brilliant surgeon, also known for being controlling and having a temper. You don't know what you're talking about. The way you flinched when I said his name suggests otherwise. Anger flared in her chest. My husband is respected in his field. I'm sure he is. That doesn't make him a good husband. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. She'd spent years making excuses for Demetrius's behavior, explaining away his coldness and criticism as the stress of saving lives. When had she stopped believing her own justifications? We should focus on your recovery. Thaddeus studied her face with uncomfortable intensity. When was the last time he asked how you're doing? Really asked, not just checking if you'd be home for dinner or some social obligation. The question pierced through defenses she'd built over years. She couldn't remember the last time Demetrius had shown genuine interest in her thoughts, her feelings, her dreams. Their conversations revolved around his career, his schedule, his needs. That's not fair, isn't it? You challenge me every day to face uncomfortable truths. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor. Serafina felt tears threaten and blinked them back. This isn't about me. Everything's about you right now. You're the reason I'm sitting here having a rational conversation instead of throwing things at the wall. You're the reason I'm considering surgery instead of rotting away in self-pity. His voice softened. Don't you think I notice how you light up when you talk about your work, then shut down the moment your phone rings? The observation was too accurate, too painful. She'd perfected the art of compartmentalizing her life, keeping her professional confidence separate from her personal insecurities. But Thaddeus saw through the facade with unnerving clarity. I should call Dr. Morrison about scheduling your surgery consultation. Serafina. The use of her first name stopped her mid-turn. Whatever's happening in your marriage, you deserve better than walking on eggshells. She met his eyes and saw something that made her breath catch. Not pity or professional concern, but genuine caring. When was the last time someone had looked at her like that? I'll make the call, she said quietly, and fled to the hallway before she said something she couldn't take back. Behind her, Thaddeus sat in the morning sunlight, surrounded by legal documents that could cost him his empire, but thinking only about the sadness in green eyes that deserved so much more than they were getting. The charity gala at the plaza was everything Serafina had learned to hate about her marriage. Crystal chandeliers cast glittering light over Manhattan's medical elite, while a string quartet played background music for conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Demetrius moved through the crowd like a shark, his hand possessive on her lower back as he introduced her to colleagues and donors. Dr. and Mrs. Kane, the perfect medical power couple. She smiled on cue, made appropriate small talk, and felt like she was suffocating in her designer dress. Serafina's been consulting on some interesting cases lately, Demetrius told Dr. Harrison, the hospital's chief administrator. Haven't you, darling? The endearment felt like ice. Nothing too exciting. Recovery therapy, mostly. I heard you're working with that pharmaceutical CEO, Dr. Harrison said. Blackmore, wasn't it? Tragic case. Such a promising man before the accident. Demetrius's grip on her back tightened imperceptibly. Yes, she's been spending quite a lot of time on that particular case. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. There was calculation in his eyes, a cold assessment she'd seen before when he was planning his next surgical procedure. It never boded well when Demetrius started planning. If you'll excuse me, she murmured, I need some air. She escaped to the hotel's balcony overlooking Central Park. The November night was crisp, a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere inside. She pulled out her phone and found herself scrolling to Thaddeus's contact information. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd exchanged several messages about his exercises and medication schedule. Professional communications that had somehow become the highlight of her days. Running away from your own party? Serafina turned to find Dr. Elena Vasquez, one of the few people at the gala she actually respected. Elena ran the trauma unit at Manhattan General and had a reputation for speaking her mind regardless of politics. Just needed some air. How are you enjoying the evening? About as much as a root canal. Elena joined her at the balcony railing. These things are necessary evils for funding, but I'd rather be saving lives than schmoozing for donations. At least you're making a difference in the world. Elena studied her with sharp eyes. And you're not? I heard you're working miracles with some pretty difficult cases. Hardly miracles, just basic therapy work. Don't sell yourself short. Word around the hospital is that you've got Thaddeus Blackmore walking again. Seraphina's heart skipped. He's not walking yet. We're making progress with standing exercises, but he's trying, which is more than anyone expected 6 months ago. Elena leaned against the railing. You know, I've heard some interesting things about his accident. What kind of things? The truck driver who hit him disappeared after the crash. No charges filed, no investigation. Strange for such a serious accident involving someone so high profile. A chill ran down Seraphina's spine that had nothing to do with the November air. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. Just observing that rich men make powerful enemies, and sometimes accidents aren't as accidental as they appear. Before Seraphina could respond, Demetrius appeared in the doorway. There you are. Dr. Morrison is asking about your work with spinal injury patients. Elena excused herself with a meaningful look, leaving Seraphina alone with her husband. In the dim balcony lighting, his handsome features looked almost predatory. Interesting conversation? Elena was just telling me about the trauma unit. I'm sure she was. Demetrius moved closer, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper she'd learned to fear. Tell me, how well do you know Thaddeus Blackmore? The question felt like a trap. As well as any nurse knows her patient. What? Because Edmund Thorne mentioned that Blackmore has been asking questions about his accident. Specifically, about medical records from the night he was brought in. Seraphina's mouth went dry. What kind of questions? The kind that could cause problems for certain people. Demetrius's hand found her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. I hope you haven't been encouraging this curiosity of his. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? His thumb traced her jawline with deceptive gentleness. Because if I found out that my wife was helping some crippled millionaire investigate things that don't concern him, I might be very disappointed. The threat was unmistakable. Seraphina had seen what happened when Demetrius was disappointed. Usually it involved long silences, cutting remarks, and punishments disguised as concern for her well-being. Thaddeus hasn't mentioned any investigation to me. See that it stays that way. Demetrius released her and straightened his tie. We should go back inside. People will start to talk if we're gone too long. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and mounting anxiety. Every time someone mentioned Thaddeus or his accident, Seraphina felt Demetrius's eyes on her, watching for reactions. By the time they reached home, her nerves were frayed beyond repair. I'm tired, she said as they entered their apartment. I think I'll go to bed. Not yet. Demetrius poured himself a scotch from the crystal decanter in their living room. We need to talk. Seraphina perched on the edge of their leather sofa, every muscle tense. About what? About the fact that you've been lying to me. He took a sip of scotch, watching her over the rim of his glass. Edmund Thorne told me some very interesting things tonight. About how his business partner has been making inquiries into medical records. About how certain files from the night of his accident seem to have gone missing. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Don't you? Demetrius set down his glass and moved toward her with predatory grace. Because those missing files include the initial trauma assessment. The one that might raise questions about response times and treatment decisions. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. You were on call that night. I was the attending physician when they brought him in, yes. And I made certain medical decisions based on the information available at the time. What kind of decisions? Demetrius's smile was cold as winter. The kind that ensured a very arrogant man learned some humility. The kind that might not look favorable under intense scrutiny. Seraphina felt sick. You delayed his treatment. That's why his recovery has been so difficult. I followed standard protocols for spinal trauma. If those protocols resulted in some additional complications, well, medicine is an imperfect science. You deliberately made his injury worse. I saved his life. Demetrius's voice turned sharp. And I won't have my career destroyed because some ungrateful patient wants to play detective. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Demetrius hadn't just treated Thaddeus poorly out of medical incompetence. It had been intentional, calculated cruelty disguised as professional judgment. Why? She whispered. Because men like Blackmore think they're untouchable. They buy their way out of consequences, step on anyone who gets in their way. Someone needed to teach him that money can't fix everything. Seraphina stared at her husband and saw a stranger. 8 years of marriage, and she'd never realized the depth of his capacity for vindictive cruelty. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to find out what Blackmore knows and who he's talking to. You're perfectly positioned to monitor his activities. You want me to spy on him. I want you to protect your husband's career, our future together." Demetrius knelt beside the sofa, his hand finding hers with false tenderness. "Unless you'd prefer to see me destroyed by some rich man's vendetta?" The manipulation was expert, wrapping threats in appeals to loyalty and love. But for the first time in years, Serafina saw through it clearly. "I won't do it." His grip on her hand tightened. "Excuse me. I said I won't spy on a patient. It's unethical and probably illegal." Demetrius's mask slipped, revealing the cold fury underneath. "Then you'd better hope your precious patient doesn't dig too deep. Because if my career is destroyed, yours will be too. And I promise you, Serafina, I will make sure everyone knows exactly who betrayed their husband for a crippled stranger." He released her hand and walked away, leaving her sitting alone in their pristine living room, surrounded by expensive furniture that felt like prison bars. For the first time since her wedding day, Serafina allowed herself to imagine what life might look like without Demetrius Kane in it. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Serafina arrived at the Blackmore estate Monday morning with her world tilted off its axis. The revelation about Demetrius's role in Thaddeus's prolonged recovery had stolen her sleep and left her questioning everything she thought she knew about her husband. She found Thaddeus in the physical therapy room, attempting to stand using the parallel bars. Sweat beaded his forehead from the effort, but his jaw was set with determination that hadn't been there a month ago. "How long have you been at this?" she asked, setting down her bag. "Since 6. He lowered himself back into the wheelchair, breathing hard. "Couldn't sleep. Join the club." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Thaddeus studied her face with that unsettling perception of his. "Rough weekend." The charity gala was as delightful as expected. She pulled out her tablet to check his exercise log, avoiding his gaze. "You're pushing too hard. These sessions are supposed to be supervised. I'm tired of being weak." Something in his voice made her look up. There was a new edge to his determination, a focused intensity that seemed driven by more than just the desire to walk again. "Thaddeus, what's really going on?" He wheeled closer, lowering his voice. "I hired a private investigator last week to look into my accident." Her heart stopped. "What did you find?" "Interesting things. The truck driver who hit me? His name was Vincent Moretti, and he had a gambling problem. Owed money to some very unpleasant people. He died 3 weeks after my accident. Apparent suicide, but the PI has questions about that too." Serafina felt sick. She thought about Demetrius's cold smile the night before, his casual admission of sabotaging Thaddeus's treatment. How deep did this conspiracy go? "Maybe you should let the police handle this." The police closed the case as an accident. No charges filed, no investigation. But here's the interesting part. Thaddeus pulled a folder from beside his wheelchair. Moretti received a cash payment of $50,000 2 days before he ran that red light. From who? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The payment was made through a shell company, but shell companies have paper trails if you know where to look. Serafina's hands trembled as she reached for his medication schedule. She needed to tell him about Demetrius, about the deliberate sabotage of his treatment, but the words stuck in her throat. If she revealed what she knew, she'd be confessing that she was married to a man who'd nearly destroyed his life out of petty cruelty. "Your blood pressure medication needs adjusting," she said instead, hating herself for the cowardice. "Serafina." His hand covered hers on the tablet. "Whatever's wrong, you can tell me." The gentle touch was her undoing. When was the last time someone had offered comfort without expecting something in return? When had anyone cared enough to notice her distress? "I can't. It's complicated. Try me." She looked into his dark eyes and saw genuine concern, real caring. Not the calculating assessment Demetrius gave her, but actual human warmth. The contrast made her chest tight with emotions she didn't dare name. "My husband knows about your investigation." Thaddeus went very still. "How?" Edmund Thorne told him at the gala. "They know you're asking questions about medical records from the night of your accident. And that concerns Dr. Kane because—" Serafina pulled her hand away from his, immediately missing the contact. "Because he was the attending physician when they brought you in." Understanding flickered across Thaddeus's features. "Your husband treated me that night." "Yes." And you think he's involved in whatever happened to me? The accusation hung between them, impossible to deny or confirm without destroying what remained of her marriage. But looking at Thaddeus, seeing the intelligence and strength that Demetrius had tried to crush out of vindictive jealousy, she made a choice. I think my husband isn't the man I thought I married. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Once the words were spoken, there would be no taking them back, no pretending her marriage was salvageable. Thaddeus leaned forward in his wheelchair. What did he do to me? I don't know the medical details, but he admitted to making treatment decisions that might not look favorable under scrutiny. He deliberately worsened my injury. I think so, yes. Rage flickered across Thaddeus's face, quickly suppressed. Why would he do that? Because he thinks men like you believe you're untouchable. He wanted to teach you humility. By crippling me. The stark words made her flinch. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but he's your husband, and I'm just a patient. Thaddeus's voice was carefully controlled, but she could see the fury burning beneath the surface. I understand. No, you don't. The words came out sharper than intended. You don't understand anything about my marriage or what it's like to discover that the person you've shared your life with is capable of deliberate cruelty. Then tell me. Serafina looked around the therapy room, at the equipment designed to help him rebuild his strength, at the man who'd fought his way back from despair despite her husband's sabotage. The courage it had taken for him to try again, to trust her with his recovery, shamed her own cowardice. Demetrius wants me to spy on you, to find out what you know and who you're talking to. And will you? I already am, aren't I? Just not for him. The truth of it settled between them. She was choosing Thaddeus over Demetrius, patient over husband, right over wrong. The implications terrified her. What happens now? She asked. Now I continue my investigation, and you decide how much you're willing to risk to help me. If Demetrius finds out I told you about his involvement, he won't find out from me. You don't understand. He's not just controlling, he's vindictive. If he thinks I've betrayed him, he'll destroy my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for. Thaddeus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Are you asking me to drop the investigation? I'm asking you to be careful. Whatever happened to that truck driver, whatever forced him to run that red light, these people don't hesitate to eliminate problems, including problems like me, or me, if they think I know too much. The weight of the danger settled around them like fog. They were treading in waters far deeper and more dangerous than a simple medical malpractice case. People had already died to keep these secrets buried. There's something else, Thaddeus said quietly. The shell company that paid Moretti? It has connections to several medical device manufacturers, companies that compete directly with Blackmore Pharmaceuticals. You think this was corporate espionage? I think someone wanted to remove me from the equation, and they were willing to commit murder to do it. Your husband just happened to be in the right place at the right time to make sure the job was finished. Serafina felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Demetrius wasn't just the attending physician by coincidence. Probably not. He was part of it from the beginning. Thaddeus reached for her hand again, his fingers warm and solid against her palm. I'm going to find out who did this to me, Serafina, but I won't put you in danger. If you want to walk away now, I'll understand. She looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his strength and her trembling. Walking away would mean returning to her sterile marriage, pretending she'd never learned the truth about Demetrius, living with the knowledge that she'd abandoned someone who needed her help. It would mean choosing safety over courage, lies over truth. I'm not walking away, even if it costs you everything. Everything I have isn't worth keeping if it means living with a lie. Thaddeus lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was tender, intimate, completely inappropriate between a nurse and her patient. It was also the most honest thing that had happened to her in years. Thank you, he said simply. Serafina felt something shift inside her chest, a wall crumbling that she'd spent years building to protect herself from disappointment. For the first time in her marriage, she was choosing someone who chose her back. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely irreversible. What do we do next? She asked. We find out exactly how deep this conspiracy goes, and then we make sure everyone involved pays for what they've done. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Hamptons, but inside the therapy room, two damaged people began planning their fight back against the forces that had tried to destroy them both. 2 weeks after their alliance began, Serafina's world imploded. She was reviewing Thaddeus's latest physical therapy progress when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single photo that made her blood turn to ice. Her and Thaddeus in the therapy room, his lips pressed to her knuckles in that tender moment of connection. The caption read, "Interesting bedside manner. Your husband might find this educational." Her hands shook as she showed Thaddeus the message. They were in his study, going over documents his private investigator had uncovered about the shell company finances. The evidence was damning, pointing to a conspiracy that reached far beyond Demetrius's medical sabotage. "When was this taken?" Thaddeus asked, his voice deadly calm. "Last week. Someone's been watching us." "For how long?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. Demetrius's name appeared on the screen like a death sentence. "Answer it," Thaddeus said. "Act normal." Serafina's voice barely functioned. "Hello. We need to talk. Tonight. Don't make other plans." The line went dead. Serafina stared at the phone, feeling trapped between two impossible choices: betray Thaddeus or face her husband's wrath. "He knows," she whispered. "Then we accelerate our timeline." Thaddeus wheeled to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. "My PI found the smoking gun this morning. Edmund Thorne received $2 million from Meridian Medical 3 days before my accident." "Meridian Medical?" "They've been trying to acquire our cardiac drug patents for years. I've blocked every attempt." His jaw tightened. Apparently, they decided to try a more direct approach. Serafina felt sick. "Your own business partner sold you out, and your husband was the weapon they used to finish the job." Thaddeus met her eyes. "We have enough evidence to destroy them all, but we need to move fast. Once Demetrius confirms his suspicions about us, they'll know we're a threat." "What do you want me to do?" "Go home. Face whatever he has planned. Buy us time to get this evidence to the authorities." "He'll kill me." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Thaddeus went very still. "Has he hurt you before?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications she'd spent years avoiding. "Not physically, but Demetrius has other ways of destroying people." "Then don't go home. If I disappear, he'll know we're onto him. Everyone involved will scatter, destroy evidence, cover their tracks. We'll lose our chance. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for this. It's not your choice." She moved closer to his wheelchair, memorizing the angles of his face. "We both know this is the only way." Thaddeus caught her hand, pulling her down until their faces were inches apart. "There has to be another option." "There isn't, and you know it." For a moment, they stared at each other, the weight of unspoken feelings heavy between them. Then Thaddeus closed the distance, capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted of desperation and longing. When they broke apart, Serafina's resolve wavered. "I should go. Stay with me. We'll figure out another way." "There is no other way." She touched his face gently. "If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you. Promise me you'll see this through. Promise me their crimes won't go unpunished." "Serafina, promise me." His eyes were dark with emotion. "I promise." She kissed him once more, soft and sweet, then stepped back. "I love you. I needed you to know that. I love you too." The words followed her out of the study, down the hallway, into her car. She drove toward Manhattan with tears streaming down her face, knowing she might never see Thaddeus again. The Upper East Side apartment felt like a mausoleum when she entered. Demetrius was waiting in the living room, perfectly composed in his designer suit, a crystal tumbler of scotch in his hand. "You're late." Traffic was heavy. "Sit down." Serafina perched on the edge of their leather sofa, every nerve on high alert. Demetrius studied her with the cold calculation of a surgeon planning an incision. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. "I don't know what you're talking about." Demetrius pulled out his phone and showed her the same photo she'd received earlier. "This suggests otherwise." "That's not what it looks like. It looks like my wife is having an affair with a patient. A patient whose investigation could destroy my career. We're not having an affair." "No." Demetrius set down his phone and moved toward her with predatory grace. "Then explain why you've been spending 14-hour days at his house. Explain why you've been taking his calls at all hours. Explain why you look at your phone when you're with me like you're waiting for someone more important to contact you." Each accusation hit its mark. She had been doing all those things, and worse, she'd been thinking about Thaddeus constantly, comparing his warmth to Demetrius's coldness, his honesty to her husband's manipulation. He's a challenging case. He requires intensive therapy. He requires intensive something, apparently. The cruelty in his voice made her flinch. Whatever you think is happening, I know exactly what's happening. Demetrius knelt beside the sofa, his hand finding her throat with deceptive gentleness. My wife has fallen in love with a cripple, and now she thinks she can help him destroy me. His fingers tightened slightly, not enough to bruise, but enough to make his point clear. Serafina forced herself to remain still, to show no fear even as her heart hammered against her ribs. I'm not helping him with anything except his recovery. Really? Because Edmund Thorne tells me that Blackmore has been asking very specific questions about medical records. Questions that suggest someone with inside knowledge has been feeding him information. I don't know anything about that. Demetrius's grip tightened. Don't lie to me, Serafina. I've tolerated your little infatuation because it served my purposes, but if you've betrayed me, there will be consequences. What consequences? His smile was arctic. The kind that ensure you never practice nursing again. The kind that makes sure everyone knows you're an unstable woman who seduced a vulnerable patient and fabricated allegations against respected physicians out of spite. The threat was expertly crafted, designed to destroy not just her career, but her reputation, her sense of self. It was classic Demetrius, turning her strengths against her, making her achievements into weapons for her own destruction. You're my husband. Why would you do that to me? Because marriage is a partnership, and partners don't betray each other. His hand moved from her throat to her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. What has Blackmore discovered about his accident? Serafina looked into her husband's eyes and saw no trace of the man she'd married 8 years ago. Whatever love might have existed between them had been poisoned by his need for control, his capacity for cruelty, his willingness to destroy lives for personal gain. I don't know. Wrong answer. Demetrius's hand moved so fast she didn't see it coming. The slap sent her sprawling across the sofa, her cheek burning with pain and shock. In 8 years of marriage, he'd never hit her. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. Let me be clear, he said, straightening his tie as if nothing had happened. You will call Blackmore tomorrow and tell him you're resigning from his case. You will recommend a replacement from the agency. You will never see him again. Serafina touched her stinging cheek, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. And if I refuse, then I'll make sure he suffers the same fate as Vincent Moretti. The casual mention of murder made her stomach lurch. You killed that truck driver. I didn't have to. Men with gambling debts and guilty consciences often find creative ways to end their problems. You're a monster. I'm a man protecting his interests. And you, my dear wife, are going to help me continue protecting them. Demetrius returned to his chair and picked up his scotch as if they'd been discussing dinner plans. Oh, and Serafina, I've had your access to our joint accounts frozen. Your credit cards are canceled. Your car will be repossessed tomorrow unless you cooperate fully. The systematic destruction of her independence was breathtaking in its thoroughness. He'd planned this confrontation carefully, anticipating her resistance and preparing countermeasures for every possible escape route. I need time to think. You have until morning. Call Blackmore by 10 a.m., or I start making calls of my own. Serafina stood on unsteady legs and walked toward their bedroom, feeling his eyes on her back like ice picks. In the ensuite bathroom, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her cheek was red and swelling, her lips split and bleeding, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Thaddeus. The web is closing. They know about the investigation. Get the evidence to the authorities tonight. Don't wait for me. After a moment's hesitation, she added, whatever happens, remember that I chose you. I chose love over fear, truth over lies. That has to count for something. She sent the message and then deleted the conversation thread, erasing the digital evidence of their connection. Tomorrow would bring consequences she couldn't yet imagine, but tonight, she'd made a choice that felt like salvation. Outside their bedroom window, Manhattan glittered with artificial light, beautiful and cold as the diamond on her wedding ring. Serafina twisted the ring off her finger and set it on the nightstand, feeling lighter with each passing second. She was no longer Mrs. Demetrius Kane. She was just Serafina, and for the first time in 8 years, that felt like enough. Thaddeus received Serafina's final message at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, he was on the phone with his lawyer. By 2 a.m., copies of every document, recording, and piece of evidence were in the hands of the FBI, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and 3 major news organizations. By dawn, his world had exploded. The first news van arrived at 6:30 a.m., followed by a parade of reporters, federal agents, and curiosity seekers. Marcus fielded calls from journalists while Thaddeus sat in his study, watching the chaos unfold through bulletproof windows he'd never appreciated until now. His phone rang constantly. Edmund Thorne demanding explanations. Board members seeking damage control. Competitors circling like vultures. But the only call he wanted never came. Serafina's phone went straight to voicemail. At 8 a.m., FBI agent Sarah Chun arrived with a warrant and a team of forensic accountants. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every type of corporate corruption imaginable. "Mr. Blackmore, we need to discuss your allegations against Dr. Demetrius Kane and Edmund Thorne." Thaddeus transferred from his wheelchair to the conference table in his study, a movement that would have been impossible 3 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd regained his strength just in time to use it fighting for his life. "Everything's documented in the files I provided. Financial records, medical reports, witness statements. Including statements from your nurse, Mrs. Rosewood?" She provided information, yes. Agent Chin consulted her notes. "We've been trying to reach Mrs. Rosewood for her formal statement. Her husband reports that she didn't come home last night." Ice flooded Thaddeus's veins. "What do you mean she didn't come home?" "Dr. Kane filed a missing persons report this morning. Claims his wife left their apartment around 10 p.m. yesterday and never returned." "He's lying." Thaddeus gripped the table edge. "She went home to confront him about his involvement in the conspiracy." "Can you prove that?" Thaddeus showed her Serafina's final text message. Agent Chen read it twice, her expression growing more serious. "This suggests she believed she was in immediate danger. From her husband, yes. Dr. Kane has been using psychological manipulation and financial control to keep her trapped in their marriage. When he discovered she was helping my investigation, he escalated to physical violence." "Physical violence?" "Check hospital records. I guarantee you'll find a pattern of injuries consistent with domestic abuse, probably explained away as accidents or clumsiness." Agent Chin made notes. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, do you have any idea where Mrs. Rosewood might have gone? If she's still alive, she'd try to reach me somehow. The fact that she hasn't means either she can't or—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Mr. Blackmore, I need to ask you directly. What is the nature of your relationship with Mrs. Rosewood?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Admitting to romantic feelings for a married woman would complicate everything, potentially undermining their credibility as witnesses. But lying to federal agents carried its own risks. "She's the reason I'm alive. Not just physically, but in every way that matters." Agent Chin studied his face. "Is that a professional relationship or a personal one?" "Both. She saved my life, then helped me save my company. If something's happened to her because she chose to help me expose the truth, we'll find her," Agent Chin said. "But right now, I need you to walk me through everything from the beginning." For the next 3 hours, Thaddeus recounted the entire conspiracy: the shell company payments, Vincent Moretti's convenient suicide, Demetrius's sabotage of his medical treatment, Edmund Thorne's betrayal, Meridian Medical's corporate espionage. Agent Chun listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification or requesting specific documents. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair with the expression of someone who'd just seen the scope of a much larger investigation. "This is going to take down half the medical establishment in Manhattan." "Good. They deserve it. The evidence is solid, but we'll need Mrs. Rosewood's testimony to make the domestic abuse and coercion charges stick. Without her, Dr. Kane could claim she was an unreliable witness acting out of romantic obsession." The words hit Thaddeus like physical blows. "Find her. We're trying. But Mr. Blackmore, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that don't." His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't say it." Agent Chin nodded and gathered her files. "We'll have agents posted here around the clock for your protection. These people have already committed murder once. They won't hesitate to do it again." After she left, Thaddeus sat alone in his study, surrounded by the detritus of his shattered life. His company stock had crashed. His business partner was probably fleeing the country. His name was splashed across every financial news channel as the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. None of it mattered if Serafina was dead. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Roof. Manhattan General. Come alone or she dies. Thaddeus stared at the message, his heart hammering. It could be a trap, but it was also the only lead he had. He called for Marcus and his security detail. I need to get to Manhattan General Hospital immediately. Sir, the FBI said you shouldn't leave the estate. The FBI doesn't have the woman I love hostage on a hospital roof. The drive into Manhattan took 45 minutes through traffic that seemed designed to test his sanity. Every red light, every pedestrian, every delivery truck felt like another nail in Serafina's coffin. Manhattan General Hospital rose like a concrete monolith against the afternoon sky. Thaddeus had his driver circle the building while he studied the rooftop through binoculars. Two figures stood near the edge, Serafina and Demetrius. Even from a distance, he could see that her hands were bound. Call the police, he told Marcus. Tell them there's a hostage situation on the roof of Manhattan General. Sir, you can't go up there alone. Watch me. Thaddeus entered the hospital through the emergency entrance, his wheelchair moving with purpose through corridors he'd hoped never to see again. The elevator to the roof required a key card, which he obtained by convincing a maintenance worker that he was a consulting physician responding to an emergency. The roof was windswept and cold, with Manhattan spreading out below like a glittering circuit board. Demetrius stood near the edge, one hand gripping Serafina's arm, the other holding what looked like a scalpel. You came, Demetrius called out. I wasn't sure you would. Let her go. Your fight is with me. My fight is with both of you. Demetrius pulled Serafina closer to the edge. You've destroyed everything I worked for. My career, my reputation, my marriage. You destroyed those things yourself the moment you chose greed over ethics. Ethics? Demetrius laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You want to talk about ethics? You seduced my wife, turned her against me, used her feelings for you to gather evidence. I loved her. That's not the same thing. Love. Demetrius spat the word like a curse. You think love gives you the right to destroy lives? I think love gives me the right to protect the woman I care about from a man who's been abusing her for years. Serafina spoke for the first time, her voice carrying clearly across the roof despite the wind. Thaddeus, don't listen to him. He's going to kill us both no matter what you say. Shut up, Demetrius hissed, pressing the scalpel against her throat. The FBI knows everything, Thaddeus said, rolling his wheelchair closer. Edmund Thorne is in custody. Meridian Medical's executives are fleeing the country. It's over, Demetrius. Killing us won't change that. Maybe not, but it will make me feel better. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. Police cars and ambulances were converging on the hospital, but Thaddeus knew they wouldn't arrive in time to matter. What do you want? He asked. I want you to suffer the way I've suffered. I want you to watch the woman you love die because of choices you made. Please, Thaddeus said, hating the desperation in his voice. I'll give you anything. Money, property, whatever you want. Just let her go. What I want is to see your face when I push her off this roof. Demetrius began moving toward the edge, dragging Serafina with him. She struggled against his grip, but her bound hands and his superior position gave her no leverage. Wait, Thaddeus called out. You want me to suffer? Then make me watch you torture her. Killing her quickly is mercy. Make it last. The suggestion stopped Demetrius in his tracks. Thaddeus could see him considering the idea, his twisted mind savoring the possibility of prolonged revenge. You want to watch her suffer? I want to understand why you hate us enough to destroy your own life for revenge. It was a desperate gambit, playing to Demetrius's narcissism and need for validation. But it worked. Demetrius loosened his grip on Serafina and turned to face Thaddeus fully. You want to understand? I'll tell you exactly why you both deserve to die. As Demetrius began his monologue of grievances and justifications, Thaddeus caught Serafina's eye and nodded toward his wheelchair. She gave an almost imperceptible nod back, understanding immediately. When Demetrius reached the climax of his rant about betrayal and humiliation, Thaddeus launched himself out of his wheelchair with all the strength he'd rebuilt over months of grueling physical therapy. The tackle caught Demetrius completely off guard. sending both men tumbling across the gravel roof. The scalpel went flying, and Serafina stumbled backward, away from the edge. Demetrius recovered quickly, using his superior size to pin Thaddeus to the ground. "You stupid cripple. You think a few months of physical therapy makes you a match for me?" He wrapped his hands around Thaddeus's throat, squeezing with surgical precision. Black spots danced at the edges of Thaddeus's vision as his air supply cut off. Then Serafina appeared behind Demetrius, her bound hands raised above her head, gripping a chunk of loose concrete from the roof's crumbling parapet. She brought it down on the back of Demetrius's skull with all her strength. He collapsed on top of Thaddeus, unconscious but breathing. Thaddeus rolled him aside and struggled to his feet, his legs shaky but functional. "Are you hurt?" he asked, working to untie Serafina's bonds. "I'm fine. Are you?" "I'm perfect." They held each other on that windswept roof, surrounded by the evidence of lives irrevocably changed, while sirens screamed their approach and helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures. "It's over," Thaddeus whispered into her hair. "No," Serafina replied, pulling back to look into his eyes. "It's just beginning." Below them, Manhattan sparkled in the afternoon sun, full of possibilities they were finally free to explore together. 6 weeks after the confrontation on the hospital roof, Thaddeus stood in federal court without assistance, watching Demetrius Kane receive a sentence of 25 years to life for conspiracy, attempted murder, and a dozen other charges that would ensure he never practiced medicine again. Serafina sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table, her testimony having been the final nail in her ex-husband's coffin. The divorce had been finalized the week before, along with a restraining order that would keep Demetrius away from her even after his eventual release. Edmund Thorne had already pleaded guilty to corporate espionage and received 15 years. 3 executives from Meridian Medical were awaiting trial in separate proceedings. The entire conspiracy had unraveled with spectacular thoroughness, taking down everyone involved. "Mr. Blackmore," Judge Harrison addressed him from the bench. "Do you have any final statement for the court?" Thaddeus looked back at Serafina, drawing strength from her encouraging smile. "Your Honor, 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. The defendants in this case tried to destroy me physically, financially, and spiritually. They nearly succeeded." He turned to face Demetrius, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. "But in trying to break me, they gave me something I never expected to find. They led me to the woman who saved my life in every way that matters." Demetrius's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I don't forgive what was done to me," Thaddeus continued, "but I'm grateful for where it led me. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the path to the best things we never knew we needed." Judge Harrison nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Mr. Blackmore. This court is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions about the case, the conspiracy, and Thaddeus's miraculous recovery. He answered what he could, but his attention was focused on Serafina, who stood slightly apart from the crowd, radiant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. When the media finally dispersed, they walked together toward his car, fingers intertwined. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Having justice finally served?" "Anticlimactic, honestly. I thought I'd feel more satisfaction watching them get sentenced." "And you don't?" Thaddeus stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "All I feel is grateful that it's over and we can finally start our real lives together." They'd been living together at the Hamptons estate for a month, but carefully, cautiously, giving each other space to heal from their respective traumas. The physical attraction between them was undeniable, but they'd both agreed to take things slowly, to build their relationship on solid ground rather than the intensity of shared crisis. "Speaking of our real lives," Serafina said, a mysterious smile playing at her lips, "I have something to tell you. Good something or bad something?" "Good. Very good." She took his hands in hers. "I'm pregnant." The words hit him like lightning, electric and transformative. "Pregnant? 8 weeks. I found out yesterday, but wanted to wait until after the sentencing to tell you." Thaddeus felt his world tilt and realign around this new reality. A baby. Their baby. Life growing from the ashes of everything they'd nearly lost. "Are you happy?" Serafina asked, suddenly uncertain. Instead of answering with words, he swept her into his arms and spun her around on the courthouse steps, both of them laughing as he nearly lost his balance. "I'm ecstatic," he said, setting her down carefully. I'm terrified and thrilled and completely unprepared, but I'm ecstatic. We'll figure it out together. Together, he agreed, the word feeling like a promise. That evening, they celebrated with dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the village, the kind of intimate place where they could talk without being recognized or interrupted. Thaddeus had made a reservation under an assumed name, wanting one perfect evening that belonged entirely to them. I've been thinking about the foundation, Serafina said over dessert, referring to the charitable organization they'd discussed establishing with part of the settlement money from the conspiracy case. What about it? I want to focus on helping abuse survivors rebuild their lives. Not just women, but anyone who's been trapped in situations where they felt powerless. Thaddeus reached across the table to cover her hand with his. That's perfect. You'd be incredible at that. We'd be incredible at that. I know corporate structure. You know how to navigate systems and make things happen. Together we could really make a difference. Together, he repeated, loving how the words sounded in connection with their future plans. They talked until the restaurant closed, sketching out dreams for their foundation, their family, their life together. Simple dreams that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago when Thaddeus was trapped in despair and Serafina was trapped in her marriage. Back at the estate, they sat on the terrace overlooking the Atlantic, wrapped in blankets against the December cold. The ocean was calm, reflecting moonlight like scattered diamonds. I have something for you, Thaddeus said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Serafina's eyes widened. Thaddeus, I know it's soon. I know we're still figuring things out. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life figuring things out with you. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant solitaire diamond. Serafina Rosewood, will you marry me? She looked at the ring, then at his face, her eyes bright with tears. Are you sure? We've been through so much trauma, so much intensity. How do we know this isn't just what? Just gratitude or shared trauma or love? Thaddeus interrupted gently. Because that's what this is. Not gratitude, not trauma bonding, but love. Pure and simple and real. He took her left hand, noting the pale band of skin where her wedding ring used to sit. I fell in love with your strength before I ever touched your hand. I fell in love with your courage before I knew your husband was a monster. I fell in love with your heart before I knew you were capable of loving me back. Thaddeus, I'm not asking you to replace one marriage with another. I'm asking you to start something completely new with me. Something based on choice and respect and partnership. Serafina was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the moonlight. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and sure. Yes, 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 I'll marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes, I want to raise our child together and start a foundation together and figure out everything else as we go. Thaddeus slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly from emotion rather than injury. It fit perfectly, catching the moonlight like a promise made tangible. I love you, he said, pulling her close. I love you too. Both of you, she added, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. They sat together under the stars, planning a future that was theirs to create, free from the shadows of their past. In the distance, waves crashed against the shore with the eternal rhythm of renewal, washing away old hurts and carrying in new possibilities. Thaddeus Blackmore had learned to walk again, but more importantly, he'd learned to live again. And Serafina had learned that love didn't have to hurt, that strength didn't have to be solitary, that healing was possible even from the deepest wounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dreams to pursue, new life to nurture. But tonight, they had each other, and that was more than enough to build a lifetime upon. The phoenix had risen from the ashes, and it was beautiful. 5 years later, Serafina Blackmore stood in the nursery of their Hamptons home, watching her husband read bedtime stories to their 4-year-old son, Gabriel, and their 18-month-old daughter, Elena. The room was painted in soft blues and greens, with windows overlooking the garden where Thaddeus had proposed on that magical December night. And then the brave princess saved the prince from the dragon, Thaddeus was saying, his voice animated as he acted out the story. Because sometimes the princess is the one who does the rescuing. Gabriel clapped his hands. Tell it again, Daddy. Tomorrow night, little man. It's time for sleep. Serafina leaned against the doorframe, her heart full as she watched the two most important people in her world say their goodnights. Elena was already asleep in her crib, dark hair curling against her pink cheek, while Gabriel negotiated for 5 more minutes of story time with the same determination his father brought to board meetings. No more negotiations, Gabriel, Thaddeus said firmly but gently. Even the best CEOs need their sleep. When I grow up, I want to be a CEO like you, Daddy. You can be anything you want to be, son. CEO, doctor, teacher, artist. Whatever makes you happy. What about a dragon fighter? Especially a dragon fighter. Serafina smiled at the exchange, remembering how Thaddeus had once been the dragon that needed fighting, trapped in his own despair and bitterness. The transformation in him over the past 5 years had been remarkable to witness. Fatherhood had brought out depths of tenderness she hadn't known existed beneath his driven exterior. After tucking Gabriel in and checking on Elena one more time, they walked hand in hand to their own bedroom. The space was warm and inviting, nothing like the sterile perfection of Serafina's former life with Demetrius. Here, family photos covered the dresser, children's artwork decorated the walls, and comfortable furniture invited relaxation rather than display. "How was the foundation meeting today?" Thaddeus asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind as she brushed her hair. "Incredible. We helped place our 200th abuse survivor in stable housing this month. The job training program has a 90% success rate, and the counseling services are booked solid." The Blackmore Foundation for Survivor Services had become their shared passion project, growing from a small operation in rented office space to a nationally recognized organization with branches in 12 major cities. Serafina served as executive director while maintaining her nursing license through part-time consulting work. "I'm proud of you," Thaddeus murmured against her hair. "You've built something extraordinary. We've built something extraordinary. The foundation wouldn't exist without your business expertise and connections. Maybe, but it wouldn't have heart without your vision and compassion." She turned in his arms, studying his face in the soft lamplight. At 48, he was more handsome than ever, laugh lines adding character to features that had once been marked by pain and anger. Success suited him, but more than that, happiness suited him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, leaving the pharmaceutical business to focus on the foundation. "Never." His answer was immediate and certain. Building drugs that might help people someday was satisfying, but helping people rebuild their lives today is fulfilling in a way I never imagined possible. After selling Blackmore Pharmaceuticals for a staggering sum, Thaddeus had briefly considered starting a new company. Instead, he'd chosen to dedicate his time and resources to their foundation work, serving on several nonprofit boards and mentoring young entrepreneurs. "Besides," he added with a mischievous smile, "I like working with my wife, even if she is a demanding boss. I'm not demanding. I'm thorough. You made me redo the quarterly budget 3 times last week because you kept underestimating the cost of expanding our Detroit office. And you were right, as usual." He kissed her forehead. "It's one of the many things I love about you." They settled into bed together, Serafina curled against Thaddeus's side in the position that had become as natural as breathing over the years. Through their bedroom window, she could see the lights of other homes along the shore, families settling in for the night just as they were. "I got a call from Dr. Martinez today," she said quietly, "about the legal proceedings." Thaddeus tensed slightly. Dr. Maria Martinez was the prosecutor who had handled the appeals process for Demetrius's case. For the past year, there had been attempts to reduce his sentence based on claims of prosecutorial misconduct and new evidence. What did she say? The appeals court upheld the original sentence. 25 to life, no possibility of parole for 15 years. Thaddeus was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel about that?" It was a question he asked whenever Demetrius's name came up, always careful to gauge her emotional state rather than assuming his own feelings about her ex-husband matched hers. "Relieved," she said honestly. "Not because I want him to suffer, but because it means we don't have to worry about him being released while the children are young. He can't hurt us anymore, Serafina. Even if he got out tomorrow, he couldn't touch our family. I know that logically, but emotionally, knowing he's locked away makes it easier to sleep at night." Thaddeus's arms tightened around her protectively. "He stole 8 years of your life. I wish I could give them back to you. I don't want them back." She tilted her head to look at him. "Those 8 years taught me what I didn't want in a partner, which made me recognize what I did want when I found you. If I hadn't lived through that darkness, I might not have appreciated this light. You're giving him too much credit. I'm giving you exactly the right amount of credit. You saved me, Thaddeus. Not just from him, but from a life of settling for less than I deserved. We saved each other. It was an old conversation between them, this gentle argument about who had rescued whom. The truth was that they'd both been drowning in different ways when they found each other. His despair had been dramatic and obvious, while hers had been quiet and hidden, but both had been equally real. I have something to tell you, Serafina said, unable to keep the secret any longer. Good something, or potentially concerning something? She laughed at the familiar question. Good something. Very good something. I'm listening. I went to see Dr. Peterson today for my annual checkup. And it turns out Gabriel and Elena are going to have a little brother or sister. Thaddeus went completely still. You're pregnant? 10 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you. 10 weeks. He sat up abruptly, his face a mixture of joy and concern. How are you feeling? Any morning sickness? Do you need different vitamins? Should we call Dr. Peterson? Thaddeus breathed. I'm fine. We're fine. 3 children, he said wonderingly. We're going to have 3 children. Are you okay with that? I know we hadn't planned. Okay with it? Serafina, I'm over the moon. I just want to make sure you're okay with it. 3 kids is a lot of work. Good thing we have excellent domestic help and flexible schedules. Good thing we're crazy in love and excellent at teamwork. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply, pouring 5 years of accumulated joy and gratitude into the connection. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I love our life, he whispered against her lips. Even the chaos? Even the sleepless nights and tantrum phases and constant laundry. Especially the chaos. Especially the beautiful, messy, perfect chaos of loving you and raising children together. They made love then with the passion of new lovers and the tenderness of old married couples, celebrating the miracle of creating new life together. Later, as Thaddeus slept beside her, Serafina placed her hand on her still flat stomach and thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 years ago, she'd been a woman trapped in an abusive marriage, convinced that she deserved nothing better. Thaddeus had been a man destroyed by betrayal and physical trauma, certain that his life was over. Now they were partners in every sense of the word, building a family and a foundation that touched hundreds of lives. They'd turned their pain into purpose, their survival into service, their love into a force for healing in the world. The road hadn't always been easy. They'd both needed therapy to work through their respective traumas. There had been nights when nightmares woke one or both of them, days when triggers from their past threatened their peace. But they'd faced every challenge together, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating each victory along the way. Thank you, Serafina whispered into the darkness, not sure if she was addressing God, the universe, or the mysterious forces that had brought them together. Beside her, Thaddeus stirred in his sleep, his arm automatically tightening around her waist. Even unconscious, he was protecting her, cherishing her, choosing her above all else. Outside their window, the Atlantic Ocean continued its eternal dance with the shore, waves carrying away the remnants of yesterday and bringing in the promise of tomorrow. In a few hours, Gabriel would wake them with demands for pancakes and stories. Elena would toddle around the house, spreading cheerful chaos in her wake. The foundation would call with urgent needs and exciting opportunities. Their beautiful, complicated, joy-filled life would begin another day. But for now, in the quiet darkness before dawn, Serafina Blackmore held her sleeping husband and their unborn child, surrounded by the love that had conquered every obstacle placed in their path. She was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the person she was meant to love, living exactly the life she'd never dared to dream possible. Love had triumphed over fear, hope over despair, truth over lies. And they all lived happily ever after.